Airports are strange places. They hum with motion, a blur of footsteps, rolling luggage, gate changes, and soft overhead announcements echoing in multiple languages. Thousands of lives intersect for just a few seconds. Strangers pass like shadows. Memories are left behind, and new chapters begin, often without fanfare. On that particular afternoon, the luxury terminal at JFK buzzed with its usual controlled chaos. Business travelers in press suits barked into Bluetooth headsets. Families wrestled with strollers and carry-ons. Couples argued softly by boarding screens. And in the midst of it all, a man walked like he owned the entire concourse. His name was Brandon Hale, 48 years old, a self-made millionaire. Founder of a chain of real estate firms. Sharp jawline, salt and pepper hair swept back, a coat that probably cost more than most people's rent. He moved with precision, the kind of man who didn't wait in line, he was the line. First-class boarding had just begun. He reached into his breast pocket for his platinum boarding pass, gave the gate agent a polished smile, and was about to step forward when it, "Daddy." The voice was soft. Barely audible above the airport din, but it hit him like a gunshot. Brandon stopped mid-step. Frozen. He turned his head slowly, almost mechanically, like a man peering into a dream or a nightmare. And then he saw her. A little girl, maybe 6, standing a few feet away. Brown hair and uneven pigtails. A pink Paw Patrol backpack slung over one shoulder. Big eyes filled with something between curiosity and heartbreak. She clutched a tattered stuffed bunny in one hand and the fingers of a woman in the other. A woman he knew too well. His ex-wife, Rachel. Her posture was stiff, her face unreadable. She looked older, maybe a little tired, but her eyes held something cold. Final. Unforgiving. Brandon's hand loosened around the boarding pass. The gate agent paused, glancing between him and the small scene unraveling behind the roped lane. "Daddy, why did you leave us?" The words were spoken so plainly, so innocently, and yet they ripped the air apart. Every nearby passenger turned their head. A businessman paused mid-call. A mother picked up her toddler to keep them from hearing too much. Even the flight attendant at the gate shifted uncomfortably. But Brandon? He couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. Because the girl's voice was not just familiar, it was his own daughter's voice. A daughter he hadn't seen in 5 years. A daughter he had left behind, buried under paperwork, excuses, and ego. And now she stood before him, eyes filled with questions, lips trembling with pain she didn't yet know how to explain, asking why he had walked out of her life. He had rehearsed 1,000 justifications over the years. Had convinced himself she was better off, that Rachel would handle everything, that she probably didn't even remember him. But now, she was standing right there. And she remembered. And in that moment, for the first time in years, Brandon Hale didn't feel like a millionaire. He just felt small. Brandon stood frozen in place, his first-class world crumbling under the weight of a 6-year-old girl's voice. He had faced courtroom battles, corporate scandals, even threats from ruthless competitors, but none of those shook him like the way her eyes did. Those eyes didn't judge. They didn't accuse. They searched. For answers. For recognition. For a father. The kind of gaze no amount of wealth could deflect. Rachel still hadn't spoken. She let the silence stretch, not out of cruelty, but clarity. Because in this silence, Brandon would have to face what he spent years running from. "What's her name?" he finally asked, his voice barely audible. Rachel blinked. "You'd know," she said evenly, "if you'd ever called." That hit harder than any slap. The little girl tilted her head, sensing something off but not yet grasping the gravity. She hugged the stuffed bunny tighter and stepped closer. "My name is Emily," she said, softly, like offering a gift. Brandon's heart seized. Emily. The name they had once circled on a napkin during dinner. The name Rachel had whispered as she lay in a hospital bed, alone, because Brandon had been stuck in a meeting across the country. He hadn't even been there when she was born. He dropped to one knee, instinctively trying to get to her level, to seem human, grounded, present. But Emily took a half-step back. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She simply stared at him, eyes wide and serious. "Mommy said you were busy for a long time, but I drew you pictures. Every birthday, every Christmas." Brandon blinked rapidly. Rachel's eyes flickered with something between pity and disgust. "They're in a box. In the closet. Still waiting to be opened." He wanted to say he was sorry. Wanted to explain how the world had swallowed him whole. How the money, the empire, the pressure, it all came at the cost of fatherhood. But none of that would make sense to a little girl who just wanted to know why her dad didn't show up. I was wrong, he managed. I made a mistake. Emily tilted her head. You made a lot of them, she said gently. But I still wanted to see you. That was it. No accusations, no tantrums. Just truth. The truth of a child who had spent her short life wondering why someone she loved didn't choose her back. Behind them, boarding continued. The flight to Zurich, first class now half full. A voice on the intercom called his name. But Brandon didn't move. He stayed kneeling. Not in shame, but in surrender. Because in this moment, nothing about his empire, his status, or his schedule mattered. Only one thing did. Emily. The airport's noise faded into a distant hum, like the world was holding its breath. Brandon remained on one knee, his designer coat grazing the scuffed tiles, his eyes locked on Emily's. She didn't flinch. She didn't run into his arms like some movie scene. She just watched him, measuring him, the way a child does when they've learned the hard way that promises don't always mean what they should. Emily, he said quietly, I don't expect you to understand all of this. But I want to. I want to try if you'll let me. She blinked slowly, then looked at her mother. Rachel gave no signal. No pushed. No encouragement. This wasn't her moment to control. This was Emily's. And Emily, wise beyond her years, tilted her head in that same quiet way and asked something he hadn't expected. What's my favorite color? Brandon's lips parted, but no sound came. Because he didn't know. What's my teacher's name? Silence. What's the name of my bunny? He looked at the worn plush clutched in her hand. He had no idea. And in that silence, the truth screamed louder than any apology could. Emily didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. Because each of those questions wasn't just trivia. They were tests. Simple, innocent questions that revealed something far deeper. Where were you when it mattered? Brandon swallowed hard, his throat tightening like a vice. I don't know, he whispered. And I hate that I don't. But I want to learn if you'll let me. Emily stared for a moment. Then, she nodded slightly. But her expression didn't soften. You can come to my birthday, she said. But you have to bring chocolate cupcakes. And Mommy said no phones. Brandon's heart cracked. Not because of the conditions, but because of the simplicity of her offer. This wasn't about money, not gifts, not making up for lost years. It was about being present. Just once. Rachel finally spoke, her voice low and clear. It's Saturday, 3 p.m. If you're not there by 3:01, don't come at all. No threats, no guilt trips. Just the line in the sand. Brandon stood slowly, The boarding gate behind him called his name again. The $1 million meeting in Zurich could wait. Because this little girl, with her honest heart and quiet strength, had just handed him something more valuable than any business deal. A second chance. But it wouldn't be given easily. He'd have to earn it. Saturday came faster than Brandon expected. And for the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about spreadsheets, flight schedules, or profit margins. He was thinking about cupcakes. More specifically, chocolate ones, with pink frosting and sparkles, just like Emily had said. He had asked his assistant to cancel everything that weekend. He turned off his phone, literally powered it down, and put it in a drawer. Then he stood in his kitchen, awkward in an apron, reading baking instructions like they were ancient scrolls, determined to do it himself. Because this couldn't be outsourced. It couldn't be ordered. It had to be earned. He arrived at 2:40 p.m., not a minute late. He parked 2 blocks away so as not to seem showy. No drivers. No luxury cars. Just Brandon, a box of slightly lopsided but homemade cupcakes, and nerves he hadn't felt since his first job interview. He knocked on the door. His heart thudded. It opened slowly. Rachel stood there, arms crossed. For a long second, she said nothing. Then, she looked down at the box. You baked? She asked, surprised. Burned the first batch, he admitted. Good, she replied. Means you cared. She stepped aside. She's in the backyard. What waited outside was not the loud, bouncing castle chaos of a rich kid's party. It was small. Homemade decorations. A balloon or two. A folding table with paper plates. A few neighborhood kids chasing each other around the grass. And in the center of it all, Emily, wearing a paper crown. Face sticky with icing. Laughing. Free. When she saw him, her smile paused. Not vanished, just uncertain. Did you bring them? She asked. He lifted the box and opened it. Pink. Chocolate. A little messy, but real. She lit up. You remembered. And then, without hesitation, she ran toward him, not into his arms, but next to him, and took his hand. The day passed in a blur. They played musical chairs. He helped her tie balloons. He poured juice into cartoon-themed cups. At one point, she leaned close and whispered, "You're doing better than last time." "Last time?" he asked. "When you weren't there," she said simply. "This is better." That night, as the party wrapped and the sun dipped below the horizon, Rachel walked Brandon to the curb. "She's not asking for the world," she said quietly. "Just to not be forgotten again." Brandon nodded, the weight of those words settling in his chest. "I won't," he promised. "We'll see," she replied. Cupcakes were a good start. And as he drove away slowly, without music, just thinking, he realized something. He hadn't just attended a party. He had attended the beginning of a life he thought he'd lost. Brandon didn't expect miracles. He didn't expect Emily to start calling him Dad the next morning. He didn't expect Rachel to forgive years of silence. And he certainly didn't expect the guilt, sharp and relentless, that came crashing down every time Emily mentioned something he'd missed. "When I had chicken pox, I wanted you to bring me soup. I danced like a ballerina at school last year." Mommy clapped so loud. "Sometimes I look at other kids with their dads and pretend they're us." Each of those moments was a quiet blade, a reminder of what he had surrendered in the pursuit of status. But Brandon did something he had never done before. He didn't run. He showed up. Every weekend. Sometimes he brought art supplies. Sometimes just his time. He sat through ballet classes. Listened to her read books. Helped with math homework that, frankly, confused even him. He made mistakes, oh, so many, but he kept coming back. Not because it was easy. But because it mattered. Because redemption doesn't come through one grand gesture. It comes through consistency. And in those small, ordinary hours, something extraordinary happened. Emily started trusting him. She began asking him things. "Can you help with my science project? Will you be at Parent Day? Can you come meet Mr. Turner? He's my teacher." Each time he answered yes, he meant it. Each time he followed through, her walls lowered just a bit more. One evening, as they watched cartoons curled up on the couch, she fell asleep on his arm. Brandon sat there, unmoving, as if scared that any shift might wake her. He looked down at her peaceful face. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel like a fraud. Or a man running from his past. He felt home. Across the room, Rachel stood in the hallway, watching. She said nothing. Just nodded once, slowly. Forgiveness hadn't been given. But maybe, just maybe, it had begun. Brandon Hale had once built towers of glass and steel. Now, he was learning to build something infinitely more fragile and infinitely more important. A relationship with the daughter who had waited patiently and bravely for him to return. And this time, he wouldn't leave.